Hello and welcome to the Enterprise Talk Conversation Series, a peer knowledge resource by the CXOs for the CXOs. Now to our host, Kanika Goswami.
Hello and welcome to our podcast On Stage with Enterprise Thought Leaders. Today we have as our guest Mike Marks, who's a Vice President of Product Marketing at Riverbed Technologies. Hi, Mike. It's great to have you with us today. How are you?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. The company Riverbed Technology offers application performance monitoring, cloud migration, network performance monitoring, and security solutions to organizations all across the world. Mike has been in the technology industry for the last 28 years. Am I right? Am I right, Mike?
Yeah, that's about right.
This has been across global brands, CA, Pacific Bell, which is now AT&T, Concord Communications, which was acquired by CA, where he worked for, I think, 8 years in senior management positions, and then Riverbed with a gap of 2 years, twice. More interestingly, Mike, he was in the Navy, in the US Navy for 8 years. Is that right?
That's right. It was a long time ago. I spent a lot of time underwater.
So that is good, isn't it? And it doesn't really go away. It, I think, trains your mind to think in a certain manner and then your behavior to go in a certain line. Is that right?
That's exactly right. It's all about working as a team towards a common mission and holding oneself and one's peers accountable to achieving that goal.
Interesting, and we'll come back to that. Another interesting aspect of Mike is that he's a competitive triathlete and a recovering ultra runner. I don't know what that means, but it sounds very interesting. Having spent 8 years in the submarine force, he loves small spaces. So, small spaces which would ideally scare other people, but I think you enjoy that. And high pressure environments and every day of fresh air and sunshine, of course, after being in submarines for so long, I'm guessing.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. So, quick query, Mike. You were in the US Navy for so long. Do you find any similarity in the challenges you faced as a submarine officer while serving the Navy and the technology market with its forever new challenges, as you would have been seeing in the last almost 3 decades?
Yeah, I think there are parallels. It's all about the mission in the Navy or in an organization. The organizations are focused on delivering a mission to their customers, to their partners, to their citizens, and the different functional groups within organizations, including IT. They all need to coordinate and cooperate to achieve that mission. And the particular groups that our company focus on are the groups within IT, and achieving that mission is exceptionally hard these days. There's a lot of technologies and complexities, which is also a parallel to the systems on a submarine.
And having said that, it is never a life or death situation, unlike as it would be on a submarine, right?
I, I think the situations are different, but there are sort of operating principles and ways of going about work that are common.
That's interesting. So now, the first question we have for you, Mike, is what is a unified observability and why is it important for organizations today?
Yeah, so unified observability. Let's define a couple terms here first. Let's first define what observability means because I think maybe not everyone is familiar with that term. It's not a new term. It's a term that's been around for a while. Got its start in systems control theory as a way of saying that one can understand kind of the inner functionings of a complex process by looking at the outputs. So in other words, if you look at the outputs of a black box, you can understand what's going on inside that black box. And IT has taken that term observability and IT has applied that term primarily in today's IT environment to cloud native environments. The modern application architectures that run on microservices, very complex infrastructures. And if you're in the IT operations space, the mission that you have is to deliver a great digital experience. But that's very hard to do in these cloud native environments because they are so large, they're so dynamic, and they're so ephemeral. Their infrastructures sort of spin up and spin down. And so the monitoring and performance market segment has used observability as an evolution of monitoring for understanding what goes on inside the black box of these cloud native environments. And that's all good. And there are lots of vendors that talk about observability today in the DevOps or the cloud native context. What Riverbed is saying is that the cloud native environment, it's not the only complex distributed environment that IT has to wrestle with today. There are complex network environments, there are complex end user environments as we're all working from home now. And so what Riverbed means when we say unified observability, we mean applying that same set of capabilities in observability, understanding inputs by looking at outputs. We're saying that can be applied across the entire IT infrastructure, not just cloud native. Does that make sense?
Yes, of course. So, do you feel that it, sorry, that it helps the overworked or exhaustion of IT teams by using unified observability better? I mean, does it come to their aid at all, or is it separate from that?
Well, it's complementary, and the way it helps IT teams today is it addresses a problem that we hear from our customers who are using all the leading monitoring tools, whether they're from Riverbed or whether they're from other vendors in the space. And the problems that they face is that because of the complexity of today's IT environments, they are overwhelmed by the number of alerts and events that flood their operations center. Um, we have customers who are experiencing and having to deal with a volume of more than 1,000 events and alerts per hour to try to figure out what do those events and alerts mean? What is the cause of the problem that's generating all these events and alerts? And the current monitoring solutions that they're relying on, whether they are correlation technologies or visibility technologies or AI ops capabilities, are just not helping them correlate together all these disparate events and alerts in such a way that they can quickly identify and resolve the issue without escalating to more senior IT staff. And the real challenge is that these senior IT staff, the people who are level 3 and level 4 engineers, they've acquired through their experience what's sometimes called tribal knowledge. They've got this inherent understanding of the situations that commonly affect customers, and they can quickly identify and resolve these issues, whereas more junior staff don't have that expertise yet. And so these experienced staff they're overworked, they're in short supply, they're in high demand, and so we've got to find a way to offload the volume of work from that senior staff and enable more junior staff to deal with the complexity of managing today's environments.
So, do you think that would mean that a senior staff at IT teams are neglecting key strategic imperatives because they're taxed with time-consuming tasks? And yeah.
Exactly. That's the whole goal, right? You've got these senior technologists who should be working on your strategic IT initiatives. What is the infrastructure that you need to be building to support new services so that you can attract and retain new customers or serve your citizens better. But instead, they're being drawn into the tactical but very important job of firefighting because the lower level staff don't have the right tools to do that troubleshooting on their own. So they're being dragged into resolving these complex issues, which, yes, does take away from the time that they can spend on more strategic IT issues. And it's also very expensive for organizations because as you require these more senior staff to get involved in trouble tickets, the cost of that trouble ticket goes up by a factor of almost 100.
Yeah, so that was the next question I was thinking of asking you, that if IT staff has to be looking for or working on firefighting all the time, it would also be a cost to the company for having them on board for doing junior level jobs. Correct. So if one were to be implementing unified observability in their organization, what would you suggest as the best practices for doing that?
Yeah, so there are a few. And the first is when we talk about unified observability as a way of identifying and resolving issues that span the entire IT infrastructure. Step number one is to make sure that you're gathering data from across that entire IT infrastructure. We call it full spectrum telemetry, meaning that you're gathering data from the end user experience, the end user device, the Wi-Fi environment in the end user's home, the network that they traverse in order to access their applications, the application environment, whether it's a cloud native environment or an environment, physical or virtual, in a data center. Step number one is full fidelity telemetry. You've got to gather data from across the IT infrastructure. And then step number two is you've got to make sure that you're gathering all of that data. You can't miss any data points, because if you miss data points, then you're missing the indications of a problem or the necessary evidence to solve that problem. So it really starts with full fidelity telemetry and unifying the gathering of all that telemetry in your environment. Step number two is to unify the insights that you can apply to that telemetry. And by unifying insights, what we mean is to correlate together all that telemetry in a variety of advanced ways, not just correlating by time that many monitoring products do today, but you've got to correlate data from, say, the transaction, and you've got to associate that to the object, the device that generated that transaction, and the location of that device, or the application that is being used in the course of that transaction. Correlating across these variety of dimensions gives you a better understanding, a more context-rich, filtered set of insights to help you identify and resolve the problem. And the last thing to unify is actions. So you've got telemetry, you've got insights, and then actions. You've got to be able to automate the investigation and the restoration or the recovery actions in such a way that you're taking the expertise that's in the minds of your level 3 and level 4 staff, and you're building that into automation so that your lower level, your more junior IT staff can do the types of trouble analysis and resolution that your more senior staff can do. And that not only frees up the senior staff to work on those strategic projects that we talked about, but it's also empowering for your more junior staff because they can work on more advanced problems and they can progress in their careers.
So, would you have any suggestions on what senior IT staff can do once you have implemented unified observability and their time is basically freed up to do slightly higher level things for the organization? How can they add value to the company's processes, probably, and also, have a better career path for themselves?
Sure. I mean, everybody's been talking about digital transformation, right? And so digital transformation doesn't happen on its own. It happens because very smart people in technology understand ways of improving today's processes and making them faster, making them better for the organization and the people whom it serves. So that frees them up to work on those types of initiatives, and which is great for the company.
Right. And for their own personal career growth, would you be able to envisage something that they could do with their time then?
Well, I think everybody wants to work on the interesting projects, right? Everybody wants to progress in their career. So what do you do with that time saved? You work on strategic projects. You can mentor the teams that work for you, um, etc. You can find different ways to add value to your organization.
Right. One quick aside that I wanted to ask you, Mike, is you were mentioning one of the best practices to be that the processes have to be automated at the end once you identify sources of problems. So automation is not a part of unified observability. It has to be integrated externally. Automation of maybe processes or tools or whatever.
Well, there's an advanced set of automation capabilities within Unified Observability, that are focused on automating the process of identifying the the root cause of an issue, and then also automating the remediation actions to take to fix that root cause. So unified observability very much includes AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning capabilities that provide automation for the areas of problem identification and resolution.
Oh, great. That's good to know. So this will have to be all for today. Thanks so much for your time, Mike, and thank you, Gail, for arranging this and coordinating for this. Thanks once more.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. We'll just wait till we are finished uploading. Oh, good to see you, Gail.
Thank you so much for being with us. Please do follow us on social media for regular updates and new content.